Hey, and welcome to the Code of Ethics presentation here for your alternate route seminar. I would certainly rather be doing this face-to-face with you, and hopefully at some point in your career with us, either through your alternate route seminar or through your classes yet to come, we'll get to interact on a one-to-one basis if I've not already met you and talked to you already. My name is Ben Burnett, and in addition to being the Dean of Education here, I'm also serving now as the Executive Vice President of the university. But thankfully, our president has allowed me to still serve and work in the School of Education, which is really my passion and my first love. More important than my title, I need you to know the frame of reference of where I'm coming from in our discussion that I'm recording this afternoon, and that is I spent 28 years in the K-12 system, so I have been doing what all of you are embarking on right now, although what you're doing is a lot tougher, a lot more complex, and a lot different than it even was last year with what all is going on in education in the world today and what we're facing. But in my 28 years, in addition to being a teacher for 11, I was a middle school principal for 10, and then also a school superintendent for 7 years. So my conversations with you on this important topic will be framed around my experience in those last two roles. Now, when I was a teacher for 11 years, I didn't understand why some things worked like they did from the administrative level, and I became an administrator and saw things differently. Then I became a superintendent and saw things even much more differently. And I can also go and say that since I've come to higher education the last 7 years, I see education, especially K-12, from really a 10,000-foot view, and I even view it differently. I'd like to go back and have a second chance at running a school or running a school district, because I think what I've learned in the last 6 or 7 years in higher ed would equip me to do things differently. So I know that all teachers say that their subject matter is the most important, and probably you say to your students during the day, I hope you say that what you're going to be telling them and what you're going to be leading them in their class is the most important that they will hear. But let me tell you, as a new teacher, whether you're in your first year and doing your internship, or if you fit in the category of this is your third year and you put off your internship to the last year, shame on you for doing that. But if you did, you've got a little bit more experience under your belt. But no matter if your first year, third year, or if you had 30 years experience, the Code of Ethics and ethical behavior for everybody in education is the most important topic. So, and hopefully, I hope you can see the slides that are behind me. You have this PowerPoint presentation Dr. Weiss has told me, so I hope that maybe while you're watching this, you can pull that up, or you'll go back and view that more carefully, because I'm going to go fairly quickly through all these slides. Certainly not as much time as I would take if you were here with me, but I don't want to shortchange anything. So how important is ethics in today's society? Well, I've had this slide for the last couple of years in doing this presentation, but let me just say that today is way more important, because we've added in the layer of not just what we've always had, the educator and student relationships, your relationships with parents, your relationships with each other, the ethics of all of that and the legal side, but now we're throwing in some of you are teaching students from home, or they're learning from home. And you have the ethical conversations of how do we know when students are present? How do we know that they are not broadcasting this class and seeing other members of my class that they're not supposed to? How do I protect the rights of privacy of my current students? So this year's struggle with ethics is much different and much more important than probably at any other time. And I do hope that this time next year, we won't have the layer of the pandemic to deal with at your level or in higher education. But I can tell you, not that I think I've got it all figured out, because I certainly don't, but if nobody has shared this opinion with you, let me be the first to tell you that education is not going to go back to the way it was. In higher education, we're having to be much more flexible, which I think is good for students, and we found a lot of ways to do that. And K-12 is not going to go back to the way it was. Parents have a lot of options now, and options that they've been craving. So just the removal of the situation of the pandemic, which I pray and hope dearly that we are able to say that it's over shortly, but it's not going to necessarily just give us the green light for everything to go back to the way it is. So things you're learning right now, especially as a new teacher, you're going to have to carry with you next year. And you have picked an interesting time. We're glad that you entered the teaching profession, but you have certainly embarked on this at a very interesting time. But hang in there, you're going to survive. So let's move quickly through the standards of the Code of Ethics. All right, so telling you from a standpoint of mostly from a former principal, really also from superintendent's perspective that I had to deal with. These are common teacher mistakes, and I would not say common first-year teacher mistakes. Every bullet up here, I have dealt with veteran teachers and some infractions in these. So this is something that everybody needs to pay attention to, not just people in their first year or first 3 years of teaching. Purchasing laws, that is actually one whole standard of the Code of Ethics that we'll get to in just a minute. But one surefire way to lose your job immediately is to violate purchasing laws and to buy something illegally, which you certainly wouldn't have that intent to do something illegal. But when you're violating the state purchasing laws that you're under, you in fact would be breaking the law. Management of your boosters or any kind of parent organization. If you're a new teacher, a lot of times new teachers are saddled with sponsoring 5 or 10 different organizations. When you're interviewing, the principal said, will you be the cheerleader sponsor, and will you sponsor this, and will you be the sponsor for that? Your standard answer is probably, sure, I'll do that, because you need to get a job. But so along with that comes the responsibility of managing a booster club, PTO or PTA organization, and those are very intricate. Social media relationships, we could have or need to have about a 3 to 4 hour conversation just on that. Policy implementation. If you don't know where to find your district policies, I want you to pause this session right now. I want you to hit pause and go to your district website, and don't come back and hit play again until you find where to find your district policies. They should be on your district website. You should be able to do a keyword search of how you look up the policy that impacts you, and your job as an employee, and it was even this would even apply to me during my superintendency, your job is to not create the policy or agree with, rather, the policy, but to enforce the policy. There were policies in the school district, even after 7 years of being superintendent, I was able to tweak, reform, introduce new ones, get rid of some old ones. But even after 7 years, there were ones that if I could have had my way and just been able to write a blank check, so to speak, and get rid of some, I would have done that. But you need to know where they are. Make sure all your paperwork's turned in. Supervision is one of the violations of the Code of Ethics. If your duty post starts at 7:45 and you arrive at 7:50 and a fight breaks out at 7:45, then you're going to be in a world of trouble, especially if somebody's injured and if there's a problem. So supervision of students is not just at the duty post, it's within your class, it's as you're along your way from one place to another, even in the class, even along the campus. If students are doing something inappropriate and especially dangerous, and you're walking by and you don't do anything, that is your supervision. You can say, well, those are not my students. It doesn't matter. You're in an authority position then, and you have to do something about that. Classroom management, and you've taken a great class, most of you this past summer on classroom management, and I can sum it up very quickly. Dr. Weiss or Dr. Miller or Dr. Aycock probably wouldn't care for my shortened summary of an intense summer-long class, but classroom management is summed up in relationships. Most teachers think, well, I'm going to put all my rules on the board, I'm going to have consequences. And I think if you're not prepared with those things, and you're going to be ill prepared and you're not going to make it very long. But a good classroom manager is somebody who has a good relationship with their students. That doesn't mean an inappropriate relationship. That's going to be violation of Standard 4 that we're about to talk about. But it means knowing your students. Students knowing that you care about them as an individual, not just the ones who have clean clothes on every day, have a backpack with their initials monogrammed on it. They have all the money to pay all their dues and their fees, and they bring you cupcakes every day. I'm talking about the students who are just scared to death to be there because they don't have anything that they need. So how are you treating them? I want you to pause and reflect on that, because it may be more difficult at times, but you have to build a relationship with those students. You may be the only person that chooses to do so. All right, so at William Carey, we unashamedly tie everything back to the Word of God. And hopefully you do that in your lives. If you don't, I want to encourage you to do that. And if you didn't pray regularly, I bet that has changed since you have become a classroom teacher, because you're probably praying every day that you'll just make it to the end of the day. And I still do that after 35 years in this business. But in the book of James, and if you hadn't read the book of James critically, I'm not a Bible scholar, so I'm not trying to preach to you today, but in the book of James, it's 5 chapters. You could probably read it in 20 minutes if you go slow. And the book of James basically tells you how to treat each other and how to live, in my opinion. And very, very wise and good words in there. But in James 3, it says, "Let not many of you become teachers, my brethren, knowing that as such we will incur a stricter judgment." Now, what I do know about this passage is that James is more than likely referring to teachers within a church. So I certainly don't think that James had in mind a classroom teacher, because there was no such thing at that time. But even though maybe he meant teachers in the church, it holds true for you and what you're doing, because you're going to be judged more strictly. Everything that we talk about in these next few minutes, I want you to filter through that. Because when we talk about social media, yes, you have a First Amendment right to post on social media. Your school can't say you can't have a social media account. They can say that you can't be friends with your students on social media, because that would be inappropriate. That's not the proper kind of relationship. But anything that you do, and social media is just one small example, will have a stricter judgment. Most of you are entering the classroom after having another kind of profession or another kind of job. It's different now. You're now seen as an authority in the community. You will get blamed for things that you have no control over, because you're a part of the school. The school district, the school system will incur strict judgment, so to speak, by all the decisions. And I'm going to tell you, I've been watching this carefully with the pandemic and monitoring what my fellow former superintendents are doing now. And I speak to a lot of them fairly regularly, and there are no good answers right now. It does not matter what decision you make about bringing everybody back, or going virtual, or going hybrid. There is not an answer that everybody's going to say that's a great decision. Do we have a graduation? Do we postpone it? Do we do virtual? Every decision that your school district and your school board ultimately is facing is very difficult. And they're going to be incurring strict judgment, but you will. And that will not disappear after the pandemic. That has been around for my 35 years of education, and I suspect it was there 35 years even before I became an educator. So we're going to get into the history briefly of the Code of Ethics. And you can look up, and you can just Google search Mississippi Code and whatever law that you want to look up. So if you say, I don't know what the Mississippi law for absenteeism is, or teacher contract renewal, the only reason you don't know is because you didn't do a simple Google search. It will bring you'll just say Mississippi Code Teacher Renewal. It will bring that up. Most education, if not all education, comes up with the first title of 37. So certification of administrators is in 37-3-2, and there's a hot link on here that when you pull that up, you should be able to bring that up. Now, you need to know your rights through this law for contract renewal and non-renewal, and most importantly, you need to know that in the first 2 years of employment, right out of school or being newly certified, which all of you fit in that category, if you're in your first 2 years, the school district can non-renew you at the end of the year without any due process. For those of you that are in your third year, if you're in the same school that you started in, then they would have to go through due process. Love to talk more with you about that. We don't have time today, but I do hope you'll check that out. So also in the law and in the history, if you'll notice that the Mississippi Code of Ethics is state board policy, and you can find this on the MDE website, State Board Policy 1717. Now here's what most people don't understand. The Code of Ethics has been a hot topic lately. In the last 5, maybe 10 years. It's what a lot of schools concentrate on, and you should know, you need to know that by signing your contract with your school district, and if you are in this class, you've signed a contract, then you've automatically agreed with your signature on that contract to abide by the Code of Ethics. So you can't pick and choose, you can't say it doesn't apply to me. If you're a teacher in the Mississippi schools and you've signed your contract, then you automatically agree to the Code of Ethics. But what most people don't realize is that this is not a new thought. It was adopted in 1998. I started my teaching career in 1986, and I must be honest with you, in 1998 I did not know that we had a Code of Ethics. That was in my second year of being a school administrator, starting my second full year, and I don't remember having any conversations with my middle school faculty about a Code of Ethics for at least 6 or 8 years after that. And you can see that there was a revision date in 2011, and that was after several issues from school districts around the state with educator misconduct with students, improper relationships, which are in Standard 4. So that caused it to be revised, and that was the date where everybody had to sign saying that they had gotten a copy of that. Now, this applies to all certified personnel. So if you're a counselor, teacher, administrator, superintendent, anybody who holds a valid teaching license, this applies to. Most school districts that I know also have taken it a step further and have their non-certified employees also sign saying that they understand that they have to abide by that. And so that would be your bus drivers, your child nutrition workers, your maintenance staff, your administrative assistants, the real backbone of the school district. Now, while the school can require those employees to abide by the Code of Ethics, the same employment policies would not apply to those because they're not. It's not written into law that way. All right, so just to give you a little, the last time I checked with the State Department of Education, and as Dean of Education, I attend all the Licensure Commission hearing meetings. As a matter of fact, today is Thursday, September the 10th. Tomorrow, on September the 11th, there's a Licensure Commission hearing at 10 o'clock. It'll be live streamed from the Department of Education. And these meet every other month, and is to approve any new programs with colleges and universities for licensure programs. But at the very end, they have a public session where they announce the surrender or revocation of license due to the Code of Ethics. So if you think, well, this happens to maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 people a year, currently on average, we have about 100 open cases with the Department of Education. I haven't perused tomorrow's agenda, although I received it today, but every agenda has at least 5 to 10 licensure surrenders. That means that people are now no longer licensed by the state of Mississippi. So it's that serious. Things that you need to know, standards 4 and 10 are the most common. Standards 4 is where we're going to spend the most time today. Any standard that you're terminated for can lead to a license revocation. So if you're terminated for standard 1 or you're terminated for standard 3, the State Department of Education can consider revoking your license because of that. The only required standard to send to the State Department of Education for review is standard 4. The school districts have to report within 10 days any investigations of standard 4. So that means that they don't have to report that they have investigated, they have all the facts and what their recommendation is. If a school superintendent is made aware on, say, September the 1st, that there has been an alleged improper relationship between a faculty member, and a student, then that superintendent has 10 days to report that to MDE. That doesn't mean they have all the facts in their decisions. They may investigate and find that there's no basis for it, in which case they'll follow up with a report. But if they wait past that 10 days, or worse yet, if they don't report it, then the superintendent of education will lose his or her license. So if you're wondering why the superintendents are so focused on that and they know it's such a big deal, they're held accountable, and they should be held accountable. There is a form that the superintendents have to fill out annually of the number of violations of that standard and have to file that, but with every report of any suspected violation of standard 4, they have to report that. So we'll move pretty quickly into the standards. Number 1 is professional conduct, and hopefully enough through your classes that you've had with us, you've already heard that you should act as a professional and demonstrate conduct that follows professional guidelines. And we'll look at the next slide and see what that looks like, but not including high standards, respecting each other collaboratively, providing professional education services in a non-discriminatory manner, maintaining competence. That means continuing to learn. Just because you've arrived, and even after you get your 5-year license, there's more you need to learn each and every year and each and every day. And maintaining professional relationships with parents. Which brings me to another Bible verse in James, chapter 1, verse 19. It says, "My dear brothers, take note of this. Everybody should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." I would recommend that you write that on the palm of your hand in ink. And as your patients are being tried each and every day as an educator, that you look at your hand and it says, quick to listen, and that should solve everything. Listen to students to be understood. Listen to parents to see their side. Listen to the administrators to know what they're being bombarded with. And listen to your coworkers for good advice, but listen to them about what they're encountering, because they have a life just like you. Everybody's facing challenges. So be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So that's how you should approach parent conferences. So standard 1 includes maintaining a good relationship with parent conferences. With this, everybody should be a team player and make sure that you're covering your duty. Go into faculty meetings, not just attending, but go with a good attitude. And unfortunately, faculty meetings happen at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon where you have no brain cells left. I'm a firm believer that faculty meetings should be at 8 o'clock in the morning. As a matter of fact, as a middle school principal, I would alternate each month. We'd only have one after-school faculty meeting every other month. And on the odd months, we would meet before school. And I would just leave out the faculty who had duty, because I just think that the first thing in the morning is a much better time. But obviously, we can't always do that. Get to know your other teachers, know your current legislation, follow your IEPs. Not all of you are special education teachers, but all of you have special education students. They are not their students, they are your students. Take a leadership position, serve on your PLC, and know what a PLC really does. So make sure that you're involved in that. So standard number 2, honesty and integrity in the course of professional practice. So you would think people that you're entrusting children to, at the very least, are going to be honest and they're going to have high integrity. But as I said in the very beginning, you're going to be incurring very strict judgment, and your decisions can't always be broadcast to all of your clientele. Parents won't know why you made a decision for one child and not for another. But sometimes you just have to know that you've done what you consider to be in the most integrity, and you've been honest. And sometimes that just has to be enough. It would worry me a lot as an administrator, because you can't tell people why you're doing everything. But sometimes you just have to rely on your integrity. So along with trustworthiness and integrity, unethical conduct with this would be reporting erroneously your employment history. So if you, worst case scenario, you get non-renewed this year and you go to apply for another job, there's a teacher shortage, you're probably going to get offered another job. If you falsify your application and say no, that you were not ever non-renewed, then you violated standard 2. So you cannot falsify anything. If you've been arrested, you have to disclose that. So be very open and be very honest. Other things on this slide that I will highlight, and you can read the rest yourself. Number 4, reasons for absence or leave. Unfortunately, in most school districts, you only have 2 personal days a year. And that's not a lot of days out of 187 school days for you to miss and it be a personal absence. You should have enough sick leave to cover any illnesses of you, your children, your extended family. But there are times when faculty members feel that they need to miss, and it's not a sick leave absence, and they will, sorry, it's not really for sick leave, but they'll code it as sick leave. That, in fact, is a violation of standard number 2. Standard number 3, abide by federal, state, and local laws and statutes and local school board policies. So there are so many layers to policies and laws that you have to abide by. It's almost mind-boggling. You start up here with the United States federal government, Supreme Court decisions, federal laws, case laws, U.S. Department of Education policies, filter on down to the state level. You have state laws, as I have alluded to earlier. You have Department of Education board policies, and you filter down again. You have local ordinances, local laws, then you have school board policies. So you have so many layers of things to get through. You could be doing something improper or wrong that you're not even aware of. So do all that you can to investigate everything. And let me say this before we leave standard 3. With abiding by laws, I would also encourage you to hit pause right now and see what your local policy is for when a faculty member has been arrested. That doesn't mean that you're automatically going to lose your job. It depends on what you are arrested for. But most school districts have a policy that if you have been arrested, then you have a certain amount of days to notify your immediate supervisor. In most cases, that would be your building principal. So please research that in hopes that none of you would ever get in that situation. But strange things happen, and you need to know that. Standard 4. This is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time, and then we'll probably fly through the last 5. Educator-student relationships. Maintain a professional relationships with all students, both inside and outside the classroom. And most violations of Standard 4 historically, obviously, have been outside of the classroom. And I'm a former high school band director, and unfortunately, people in my former profession, and coaches, cheerleader sponsors, choir directors, anybody who supervises students at an extended time outside of the classroom would fall victim of this the most. So let's look at Standard 4. Let's go on to the next one. There are some scenarios on here that I'm going to skip over. If you'd like to read those, I think it would be good. All right, so ethical conduct means being a mentor, nurturing your students, providing an environment unnecessary embarrassment or disparagement, creating and supporting and maintaining a challenging learning environment. So violations of this: sexual jokes, sexual kidding of any kind, inappropriate touching, fondling, kissing, or grabbing. Now that sounds like something that you shouldn't hear, that just something that would be common sense, but you just need to be careful. Threats and saying things that can be construed as a threat, knowing that you don't mean it, but don't say it. In your haste, in your anger, don't say what you're going to do to them, just thinking, well, they'll know I'm kidding. That can come back on you very, very hard. Number 10 and 11, texting your students. Here's a hard and fast rule: never. Never, ever send a private text message to a student. Your schools, all of them, have texting apps that you can go through, and I think texting or messaging students and parents through your provider, whether it's school status or whoever your school district uses, is an excellent way to make announcements that this is what the homework assignments is. There's a test tomorrow. The bus leaves at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be getting back at 10. Parents today have every avenue, every means to be totally connected to the school, and that's wonderful. Sending a private text to a student has no place, and that's what's gotten a lot of people started in an inappropriate relationship. It may start as an innocent text, and even if you have no ill intent, it can be misconstrued as being ill intent and can come back on you. Invitation to social networkings. I've talked about about having relationships with your students. That does not mean being their friend on Facebook. You can be on Facebook. You can be friends with their parents, which I don't even recommend doing that, because parents are going to look you up and troll you on Facebook anyway, whether you're their friends or not. So you just need to be careful. Think carefully before you hit post, because once it's up there, it's always there. And I've seen people that I've known throughout my career recently lose their position for things that they would post that in this time would be very inappropriate. So be very careful. So know your board policy on social media. Look it up soon. Never text your students. Use only approved form of electronic communication. And be careful of emails. Number one, don't fire an email back before you think about it. I have to catch myself a lot of times when I get an email that will rub me the wrong way and I'll respond. I always have to kind of take a breath before I hit send. And sometimes I don't take enough breaths and I hit send and I wish I could get it back, but it's there forever. And if you're wondering, well, I can just delete it. Somebody sends me an email, I can just delete it. It's on the school server forever. And I have documented legal proof of that from some court case situations. Be careful of emails. If somebody sends you an inappropriate email on your school email address, delete it as soon as you can. Print it out so you have a hard copy. Save it. Go to that person and tell them not to ever email you again. So when in doubt, now I love to be on Facebook for our marketing purposes and connecting all of our graduates. We graduate about 500 School of Education graduates a year, and we try to connect with our school community here socially on Facebook. And I had never been a Facebook user until I retired from the superintendency and moved to be Dean of Education here, and I created a Facebook account because I had to have it to manage the School of Education page. And I thought, well, I'll just set this up and never use it. And the next morning I had about 300 to 400 friend requests, and I started looking through it. It was students I had taught over the last 30 years. And it's a great way. I love keeping up, and some of you who are listening to this I'm Facebook friends with probably, and I love keeping up with what's going on with people. But in your situation, I would limit it as much as possible. A great saying that I didn't Stole this from Dr. Willie Pierce, who is our higher education coordinator here at William Carey. Dance like there's nobody watching, and if I danced, I would hope nobody's watching, because I'm a drummer, but unfortunately I can't dance, have no rhythm. Dance like nobody's watching. Email like it one day will be read aloud in a deposition, because anything you send will reappear in a court case at some time. So that's standard 4 in a nutshell. Be very careful, know that it has to be reported, and also know that that means if you have knowledge of it. That doesn't mean if it's just you involved with it, don't do it. That means if your teaching partner next door you think is having an inappropriate relationship with a student, and you don't do anything and you don't report it to your assistant principal or your principal, it's going to be difficult to do, but if you don't do it, you're going to be in harm's way. So standard 5, educators should have professional relationships with colleagues inside and outside the classroom. That's a no-brainer, but I have seen many teaching teams and teachers who do not get along with each other. Professional learning communities, committee meetings, team teaching, collaborative lesson planning, everything you do should be from a team concept. Unethical, and the very first bullet here is the only thing I'll highlight. You're going to find out personal things about your teaching partners and your teammates. That's confidential information. You can't go out and say so-and-so's going through a divorce, so-and-so's child is on drugs, they have this diagnosis. You can't say that. Whatever you're like a sponge that never gets to be released of the water that comes in. Everything that you hear, you're soaked up inside of you, and you can never leave you. That doesn't mean you don't listen to people, but it means you never tell. Standard 6, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use. Let me just cover this standard by one scenario that is a very real scenario in many cases, many school districts. The school is not saying you can't drink alcohol. And if they did, I believe that probably many people would not have a job. But what they are saying is you can't be under the influence of anything while you're on the premises. So let me give you a scenario. You've made it through the most challenging week of your teaching career thus far. You just didn't think you would make it all the way till Friday without resigning. You finally made it, and you go home, and you decide the only way to relieve that stress is to have 3 or 4 of your favorite adult beverages. That's your house, that's your business. You do that, you feel much better, and you realize that the kids at that school are not near as bad as you thought, and you want to build a relationship and go back and watch the football game that night. Well, you can do that, but you're now under the influence, and even though you may not even teach at that particular school, but if it's in the school district and you're on the premise and you're under the influence, it's a violation of Standard 6, and you will be terminated. Not non-renewed is at the end of the year. Terminated is you don't have a job anymore. So be very careful. Go ahead to the next one. Public funds I've alluded to earlier. Everything that you have is public property. The laptop that you have, I would do limited to no personal things on your laptop, even when you take it home, because that is a school's property that anytime they can remote in when you're on the school network to see what's on there, what you're doing. Schools don't have time to do that, but they do have the right to do that. Other public funds and property, you need to know how to do purchase orders. You don't just go get something from a store and then come back and bring a receipt and expect them to pay for it. They can't, because there was no purchase order, or the purchase order date was after the invoice or after the date that you bought it, and that's an illegal purchase. So if you're a coach and you say, well, look, I really need these jerseys are on sale, I need to spend $2,000, and you go out and put it on your credit card, and you come back expecting the school to reimburse you, they're not going to do that, and you'll just be out of that money, and you may be out of a job. Know what the purchasing laws are. We'll go ahead to the next one. And the next one. Educators should maintain integrity with students, colleagues, when accepting gifts, gratuities, favors, additional compensation. The day before a big algebra test, you don't need to receive a week free stay at somebody's beach condo for one of your children. If you're a baseball coach and tryouts are next week, you don't need to be giving hitting lessons and getting money for it, and then the people who take hitting lessons from you magically be the ones that make the team the most. You need to be very careful of anything that you do. Confidentiality we've already hit on. Let's go to this next slide, because the biggest piece of this is maintaining test security. Now, I'm going to say some things here on the record because this is being recorded and you can show it to anybody. I hope and pray that everybody who has any part of the decision-making process will see that we don't need to be taking standardized tests this year. I don't know how that's going to happen, if that's going to happen or not, but I think it makes only logical sense. But I can tell you, if we don't take them this year, they're coming back. And I do agree that we should be held accountable. I don't agree with the whole unprofessional way that we handle standardized testing. We almost treat our certified teachers like they're not capable of administering tests by themselves, or that they're going to cheat. So there are a lot of laws and regulations in place to monitor that. So when you do administer standardized tests, and some of you already have, some of you will this year, but all of you will at least by next year. Make sure that you're following that, and you maintain strict confidentiality and maintain test security. And then the last code of ethics, number 10, breach of contract or abandonment of employment. This is the second most reported standard other than standard 4. And it can happen in one of two ways. One way is to not supervise your students and not being on duty and not taking care of your students. Another way, and this is something that would apply to all of you who are listening, abandonment of your contract. If you've taken a job at a school district and you said, well, it's a job, this is not where I wanted to be, but it's a job, and I'm going to take this, do my internship, get my 5-year license, and try to move on. But then magically in October, the school district that you really wanted to work in calls you and said, look, we didn't have a position for you this summer, but somebody called and they just can't take any more of this virtual learning. They're out of here and we'd like to hire you. Well, you're under contract with that school district. Now, if your current school district releases you, which they probably won't, if they release you and you're no longer employed, then you can take that other job. But if you say, well, I've accepted this one job, signed the contract, but I want to go work over here, then you've abandoned this first job, you could potentially lose your license. Or if it's at the end of the first month and you say, I just cannot do this, maybe next year at another school district, but I just can't stay here any longer, I'm going to go back to the job I had in the business world and try this again, and you just resign and leave, then you've abandoned that contract and that job. The State Department can, or the school district can, request for your license to be revoked. Not all of them do, and they don't always get revoked, but it's not a chance that you need to take. All right, so that's the 10 standards. A lot to think about. Thanks for humoring me and making it all the way through. It looks like we're at 43 minutes and 20 seconds. And I could talk for about 3 to 4 hours more just on this topic. And I hope to interact with you face to face. God bless you. We're grateful for you. You're in a record-breaking class. You're in a record-breaking year here at William Carey University, our largest enrollment ever, not just in the School of Education, but in the university. And we're proud that you answered the call to teach. God bless you.